Welcome back. You're still tuned into News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidira. The time is 8:38 Central African Time. And we're going to be switching gears now to a very, very interesting topic. We'll be talking the global Sumud Flotilla. There's been an interesting development this past weekend, and I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm going to be joined by the representative of the global Sumud Flotilla South Africa, Yesh, Govender, who's going to be giving us insight on the latest regarding that voyage. The Global Sumud Flotilla, as you know, is one of the initiatives that I think right now we can say are doing incredible work when it comes to trying to break the blockade on Gaza. They're trying to deliver much, much needed humanitarian aid to the people of Palestine, and they're using the sea, they're using the ocean to do so. They've been faced with a lot of challenges, but today we can touch on what can be considered a victory, right? Yes.
Yes, we call it a victory, small victories, but a number of small victories can end up being a large one.
Can you give us a bit more insight on that? I saw the statement that you guys have released about an Israeli boat. What was that all about? How did the Global Sumo Flotilla intercept, assist in making sure that it doesn't reach its destination? For viewers that don't really know what's happening on that front.
All right. Basically, yesterday, 19 boats that were part of the Global Sumud Flotilla intercepted and managed to divert a ship which is carrying materials which would be used in the production of arms in Israel. The ship in question is the MSC Maya, and these 19 boats basically received information that the ship was carrying material that would be used in the manufacture of, or it's high quality steel that will be used in the manufacture of artillery pieces, among other weapons. And a decision was taken by the flotilla leadership that they would attempt to intercept this boat. Now, I do want everyone to understand, intercepting and diverting this boat does not mean that this boat or this ship has permanently stopped its journey. It has turned back, right? And the chances are very good that it will recommence its journey as soon as the boats are out of sight. Right? I don't have the latest report on what this ship is doing at the moment, but I would also want everyone to understand that when you have commercial shipping, a delay of even an hour can work out to be very expensive for the shipping company as well as for their clients. And in this case here, we are talking about a delay of more than an hour. You know.
And I think that's very, very important. And I think we can definitely consider it a victory. Is these little kind of steps and these little kind of actions that make sure that, we deal with this blockade broadly, little victories, as you mentioned. But when they pile up, you have little victories here and there, and they become very, very meaningful. Let's talk about the legalities of this, because that's what other people are going to question. How legal was this endeavor? Was it a protest? Because protests are legal, and I think there's limits of how far you can go when you protest. You can blockade, you can block a road, you can block a building, you can stop products from being bought or sold on certain stores that should be boycotted. Is this a similar kind of scenario? Can we compare it to that?
Okay, I'll be very honest. I had this discussion with someone else in our team yesterday, and we're taking the view that the members of the flotilla who actually intercepted and diverted this ship, that they were actually implementing international law, right? If we go back to South Africa's ICJ case, right, the case at the International Court of Justice, where our country charged Israel for genocide, you'll see that the court ordered preliminary measures against Israel, and parties to the Genocide Convention were required to implement those preliminary measures. Sorry, is what the court called them. And among those, one of the measures that the court stated was that parties to the Genocide Convention should cease supplying Israel with weapons, which would basically allow Israel to persist in its genocidal campaign against the Palestinians. So we are of the view that our members on that flotilla are merely enforcing international law. Right? We will resist any allegations of their actions being illegal. And what we would say that, yes, the actions might be dramatic and some might consider them extreme, but our view is that the circumstances justify these interventions because the states and the governments have not intervened in this matter. The United Nations hasn't. And it's evident that corporates will not intervene in this matter. In fact, they are very complicit in how this genocide is being conducted.
And I can tell you, Yesh, nothing is as extreme as blowing up children and innocent men and women. Let's talk about the Global Sumud Flotilla, the 2026 campaign. Can you give us a bit more insight on that? Do we know how many boats are going to be trying to break this blockade this time around? The South African contingent, how many are they, and where are they at this current point?
Right. I'll start with the issue of the South African contingent. There is a delegation that will be leaving South Africa and which will be participating in the Sumud Flotilla. I'm not at liberty at this point to actually identify who those delegates are and where they are in the country. That's for security reasons. And yeah, so we'll have to wait for them to depart the country before we actually release their identities to the public. And then going through to the actual makeup of the flotilla, what I can tell you is that firstly, it is larger than the flotilla that attempted to breach the blockade last year. It's almost doubled in size. And if people, if you all remember, last year, one of the boats from that flotilla almost breached the blockade. It was within sight of Gaza. The people in Gaza could see this boat before the Israelis intercepted it and diverted it. I think they diverted it to Ashdod. Okay, I can't remember exactly the port it went to. But this boat was a Marinette and it came within sight of Gaza. So if that's what happened last year, and that was with half the number of boats, we are quite optimistic that this year, with almost double the number of boats, there's an increased chance of success in this mission. I also want to remind people that this mission is not just about reaching Gaza, dropping off aid, and turning back, right? The intention, and if people will go through and actually check what the Global Sumud Flotilla's objectives are, they will realize that one of the stated aims of the flotilla is to establish a land or to establish a humanitarian corridor. And a humanitarian corridor means by sea and land. So what we are saying is if this contingent of boats from the flotilla managed to make landfall in Gaza and to actually deliver aid there, they would have established a precedent for more boats to come through. Because at the moment, Israel has almost total control over what goes in and out of Gaza. Whether it's people, whether it's medical supplies, whether it's food, the Israelis control everything, right? And the way in which they exercise their control is extremely cruel. You'll see that if you look at footage, you'll see lines of trucks carrying humanitarian aid waiting to pass through Israeli checkpoints. Those trucks, the Israelis basically provide humanitarian aid agencies with a list of goods that are permitted into Gaza, right? But what the Israelis do is they will arbitrarily change the list of goods. So a truck that might be carrying, for example, an example that we often use is like baby formula, right? So a truck carrying baby formula might be moving towards to deliver it in Gaza under the impression that baby formula is authorized by the Israelis. That truck driver waits in a long line, waits to get to an Israeli checkpoint, and at the Israeli checkpoint is then informed, no, we've changed the list, baby formula is no longer approved, you have to actually turn back. Now, that sort of uncertainty that it brings to the lives of the Palestinians, that is extremely damaging. We're talking about people that have been cut off from all forms of relief or assistance for the past 3 years. And they're living an extremely unstable life, and they can't even rely on what sort of aid shipments they're going to be receiving.
Very, very concerning indeed. You spoke about success, of the previous flotilla and just how much it was able to do. Just recapping from that, and I think, all of us were following it quite closely, especially us here in South Africa, considering that, you had some very, very prominent South Africans and even ordinary South Africans that were on board, Mandla Mandela obviously being the most prominent one. When you look at that flotilla, last year's one, what would you say was the key moment of success for you? Because a lot of conversations are being had around, these flotillas. There are people online who say, you know what, these are just all for aesthetics. These are all for Instagram. They don't have much meaningful impact. Keyboard warriors, that make all these kind of crazy statements. Last year's flotilla, its impact from your point of view, what would you say that was?
I'll say firstly, and this is something that I've previously mentioned. I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway and realization that people got from last year's flotilla was about the strength of international solidarity. Right, the flotilla last year with people across the world working towards one purpose, which was to breach this blockade. Right, they worked across racial, religious, linguistic divides. And it's the same with this year's flotilla. I think the ethos established in last year's flotilla is carried through to this year's flotilla, and that's the biggest takeaway that I have actually had out of the actually working on this flotilla mission, is that international solidarity is extremely powerful, and that the other big takeaway was the realization that people who are not Palestinian are actually willing to risk their lives to intervene in a genocide. And I can honestly say that I've got comrades. Honestly, I'll use the word comrades to describe these people that I've never met in my life. They live on other continents, in other cities, but we speak quite often. We communicate. We share strategies. We discuss challenges that we're facing in our own areas, as well as what's going on in the world. But these are relationships that were established through the flotilla mission, and these are relationships that are quite strong. So what we're talking about here is a global or an international solidarity movement that is simply getting stronger the longer it actually establishes itself.
Most definitely. Yesh, Govender, I'm going to let you go, but I'm pretty sure me and you are going to be talking very, very often because we follow the flotilla quite closely here at Salam Media. It's a really, really wonderful initiative, and it's something that we think all South Africans need to know about, and the people the world over need to be involved in, especially those that are at home. I think what was interesting for me in the previous flotilla was how online, how we made a trend and people were tweeting about it and were posting about it, and people were posting videos and sharing the live links that the Global Sumud Flotilla had to try and track these boats and to make sure that at least they are safe. The eyes and ears on the world are fixated on them, and no harm could be done upon them. So I think it's a very, very wonderful initiative, and I hope we chat again soon. Really appreciate it.
All right. Okay. Thank you for the interview. Appreciate it.
There you go, Yesh, Govender, representative of the South African Global Sumud Flotilla. And again, it's one that we'll be following quite closely here at Salam Media. You can follow us on our various social media pages, and we'll be able to give you the latest on that front. Otherwise, going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.